Here we go, Episode 5, Overland Journal. And this is going to be pretty controversial because we're talking about Devil's Tower, we're talking about Theodore Roosevelt, the ex-president, and the book that he wrote, The Wilderness Hunter. And in this book, he has a whole chapter dedicated to a story of Bigfoot attacking a hunter and killing him. You're going to want to hear this story. And for all those that are confused or keep asking this question down here, I'll leave links below. This video has been up on this channel since 2021 of June. Okay? It explains everything you need to know. So here we go. Once again, before we start this video, I'm going to ask you to hit that subscribe button and also hit the little bell right next to it so you're notified of all new videos. Here we go. In episode 4 of Overland Journal, I was telling you about 3 people that tragically lost their lives at Imogene Pass on Camp Bird Road in Colorado. And I ended up on Inside Edition and they were talking to me, blah, blah, blah. Well, this video is going to be a little more lighthearted. We're going to talk about Devil's Tower, Theodore Roosevelt, and a book called The Wilderness Hunter, and how Teddy Roosevelt talks about Bigfoot in The Wilderness Hunter, and how he was also the man that actually made the first national monument in the United States, which happens to be Devil's Tower. But before I headed to Devil's Tower, I was in Warland, Wyoming, a very small town with a couple of really good friends there. And I found myself escorting a rattlesnake across the road.
You gotta go, buddy.
He was warming himself in the middle of the road because it was only about 75 degrees out. And I had to convince him it was a good idea to get across the road before somebody ran him over. And then after I helped the snake across the road, I found myself at about 9,000 feet in the Bighorn Mountains. And I came across an enormous cabin complex where you could rent a cabin for the weekend, etc. And I pulled over to let my truck cool down and discovered that this place was completely empty. And it was a really freaky thing.
So, I'm inside an abandoned camp. It's very strange. This place is empty. Somebody bought a hat and left money. That is strange.
Now, this was really odd. I've come across random cabins in the woods out in the middle of nowhere, but this wasn't out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it was on top of the Bighorn Mountains. You could see it from the main road. But I mean, this place looked like somebody just dropped everything and ran out for some unknown reason. Everything was clean. There was money on the counter. There was car keys and a cell phone on the counter. And when I left, they were still there. But I mean, this was odd. No trespassing signs, nothing like that. The place wasn't all dusty and full of mice and birds. It was just totally and utterly abandoned. And there was some really cool stuff in there, like that horse saddle you just saw. It was pretty amazing. I couldn't understand it, but something made them drop everything, leave it unlocked, and run out the door. Because that's exactly what happened. I've camped not too far from this site out in the woods and never ran into anything strange, but something scared these folks off in a hurry. At any rate, back to Devil's Tower. Over the years, I have made videos with my own original footage from locations like Clark's Fork Canyon, 10 Sleep, Imogene Pass, the Gateway to Hell in Arizona, Utah Monolith, etc., etc. But I love history, and I love getting the true history from locals and from legend. And Devil's Tower is rich with legend and lore. Devil's Tower has ended up in movies like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It is highly regarded by Native Americans as a highly spiritual location, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. As well as people come here to climb this, people come from all over the world to see this. You drive in Wyoming, a relatively flat area until you come along to Devil's Tower, and it just juts right up. Many people even believe that this may be a fossilized tree stump from biblical times. And when you look at this thing closely, you can see exactly why they think that's the case. But I digress. So it is Saturday morning, and I am heading into the Bighorn Mountains, through the Bighorn Mountains, to get to Devil's Tower. It's going to be a clear night tonight, and there won't be any moon. And my goal is to do some astrophotography. I'd like to get the Milky Way right above Devil's Tower. And I've got some time to do it. I'm waiting on a few things to come to my buddy's place in Wyoming. So I'm going to hang around here till Friday. So today I'm just taking an amazing ride through the Bighorns. I'm in the town of 10 Sleep right now. And if you've never been here, I did a video last year on the town of 10 Sleep and the murders that occurred in 10 Sleep, in case you didn't get that memo. It's a good video, and it shows the town rather nicely. I'm also listening to an audio book that maybe you've heard about or maybe not, but it's called The Wilderness Hunter, and it's by Theodore Roosevelt. Remember him? Used to be the president, and coincidentally enough, he's the one that made Devil's Tower the first national monument in the United States. How crazy is that? Now, I love history, and I love true history. History books don't impress me all that much. Writings from antiquity, they do. So the story on Devil's Tower is, as people began to settle the area, support grew for the idea of preserving the tower as a national monument or a state park. And in February of 1892, Wyoming Senator Francis E. Warren wrote the Commissioner of General Land Service seeking to protect Devil's Tower and the Little Missouri Buttes, located several miles to the northeast. They used the Forest Reserve Act of the previous year to set aside 60 square miles as a temporary forest reserve. By June 1892, the reserve was reduced to 18.75 square miles, with the remainder being reopened to settlement. It was not until 14 years later that Devil's Tower became a national monument. Due to lack of congressional support, a different avenue of protection was sought. The Antiquities Act of 1906 offered a new opportunity for protecting the tower. This act allowed objects of historic or scientific interest to be set aside by the president. Wyoming Rep. Frank W. Mondell lent his support to the plan to have the area preserved as a national monument. Mondell was a member and late chairman of the House Committee on Public Lands. And due to influence in large part of Mondell's, President Theodore Roosevelt proclaimed Devil's Tower as the first national monument on September 24, 1906. The acreage set aside was only 1,153 acres, believed by the president to be sufficiently large to provide for the proper care and management under the monuments under the terms of the Antiquities Act. Some question whether Theodore Roosevelt ever visited Devil's Tower. Early residents of the region claimed he visited the place on a hunting trip through the Black Hills. Others say he was present during the dedication. However, no evidence exists to validate these claims. In 1903, Roosevelt made an extended tour through the West, stopping at Gillette, Moorcroft, and Sundance, Wyoming. It is likely he saw the tower from a distance during the tour. It is known that Roosevelt possessed a deep appreciation for natural history. This appreciation led him to set aside over 200 million acres of public lands during his time as president. These lands included national forests, federal bird reserves, national parks, and 18 national monuments, which is pretty badass. And after reading The Wilderness Hunter, which is a very long book, this guy traveled the entire United States, east to west, north to south, and killed and shot and ate every type of animal there possibly was, while writing that even back in the late 1800s, animals such as buffalo, bison, elk were becoming hard to come by due to people that were just absolutely gun crazy. They would shoot anything that moved, hence the buffalo, Native Americans, eagles, etc. So Roosevelt was actually good for this country as far as trying to preserve what everyone else was simply killing and figuring was disposable, in my opinion. Now, on the other hand, the Native Americans held Devil's Tower in very high regards, and lots of folklore existed about it. Dozens of narratives exist about the new inn of the Bear Lodge, passed down between tribe members for generations. One such story comes from the Crow tribe. Before the tower, two young girls were playing among large boulders in the area. The region was populated by bears, and one especially large bear saw the girls and was going to eat them. The girls scrambled up to the top of the nearest rock but couldn't escape the bear. Then the Great Spirit saw that the bear was about to catch the girls and caused the rock to grow tall, allowing the girls to escape the bear. The bear continued to claw at the mountain but could not make it to the top of the rock. You can still see the claw marks of the bears, and the girls are still atop the tower. Now, while each tribe has its own representations about the remarkable formation, the bear theme permeates across oral history of the Plains tribe members. In fact, the name Devil's Tower, which initiated after a member of scientific expedition misinterpreted the name Bear Lodge to Bad God's Tower, but does not accurately represent the sacred site. Currently, a proposal to change the name to Bear Lodge exists, but can only occur by congressional action or presidential proclamation. Today, many return to the site to worship, fast, and celebrate. Throughout the year, but especially in June, tribes perform ceremonies such as sweat lodges, vision quests, and group rituals like the Sundance. When you visit, you may see colorful cloths or bundles adorning trees near the base of Bear Lodge. Tribe members leave these as personal prayer offerings or in remembrance of a person or place. I saw these all over the place. I've seen these at many sites like the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio or America's Stonehenge in New Hampshire, which you probably don't know about. But I will be showing that in a video fairly soon, I think, if the creek don't rise and the good Lord's willing. Now, one other theory on this particular rock formation, which is unlike any other rock formation in the United States, period, is that it is the remnants of a biblical massive tree that became fossilized. And before you roll your eyes and shake your head, if you've never been there, well, you've never been there. But I'll tell you what, if you look at this massive rock formation, the entire base of it is surrounded by prayer bundles, colorful strips of cloth in remembrance of others, etc. But it's just surrounded by massive boulders, and then it just goes straight up. And the tree, I'm sorry, a little Freudian slip. The rock looks exactly like the cells you would see in a cross-cut tree, all the way to the very top, including on the top. It looks nothing like a rock. It looks almost completely and only like a tree. Is that the case? Well, we'll never know, because history is held close to the vest by the wealthy people that have always ran this country and this world. And the less we believe that there is a creator, the happier they are. It's just how it is. Look at history, look at the way of the world, and it stands to reason. I shouldn't have to explain very much more. But when you look at this, it looks much more like a tree stump than it does a rock. Period. Even the fact that it's cut off perfectly straight on top makes little to no sense. Okay, that's my opinion on the Devil's Tower. That was the first national monument in the United States, thanks to Theodore Roosevelt. Now, let's go to Theodore Roosevelt's book, The Wilderness Hunter. Chapter 20, Bowman's Story. Now, Teddy basically documented every type of terrain he came in contact with, every type of person he came in contact with, and every type of animal he came in contact with, hunted, and then ate in the book, The Wilderness Hunter. And he gave this story enough credence to make it an entire chapter. So it is what it is. I'm also going to show you documents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the United States Army that all point directly towards Sasquatch as an actual thing. Now, for all of those people that are sitting in a chair that have never left the city or have never found themselves out in the middle of the woods or the desert or the forest or at the top of the Sierra Nevadas by themselves, after you do that, you tell me if Bigfoot's real. Your call. At any rate, here we go. From Chapter 20 in The Wilderness Hunter. The finest hunting ground in America was, and indeed is, the mountainous region of western Montana and northwestern Wyoming, Theodore Roosevelt wrote in The Wilderness Hunter, an 1893 memoir of his adventures at the frontier. There, Roosevelt encountered thick forests, towering peaks, and vast plains veined with streams and rivulets. He pursued the continent's megafauna, from white-tailed deer and beaver to bison, moose, and the grizzly bear, while reveling in the fresh air and lively stories of his fellow outdoorsmen. The forest also held a secret. One of his hunting expeditions in this primeval landscape, Roosevelt heard an anecdote that stood out from the unusual tales on the trail. Roosevelt had studied the flora and fauna of the West, but had never heard of a creature as strange as the one at the center of this yarn. It was told by a grizzled, weather-beaten old mountain hunter named Bowman, who was born and passed all his life on the frontier. Roosevelt relayed in his memoir, he must have believed what he said, for he could hardly repress a shudder at certain points of the tale. When Bowman was still a young man, Roosevelt recalled, he and a friend set out to trap beaver in a rugged river valley in what was then the Montana Territory. They went up a mountain pass where, the year before, a lone trapper had been killed by an unidentified beast, the half-eaten remains being found afterwards by some mining prospectors who had passed his camp only the night before. There, they left their horses at the foot of the pass and climbed up a small glade where they pitched camp. With some hours of daylight remaining, they were to set their beaver traps in the stream and return to camp just as the sun dipped behind the screen of pines. With a shock, they found their lean-to flattened and the contents of their packs scattered among bear-like footprints in the earth. Bowman's companion made a torch from the campfire and peered at the tracks. Bowman, he said, that bear has been walking on two legs. Bowman laughed off the ideas, and the two trappers soon went to sleep in their repaired camp. But Bowman was awakened in the night by a fetid stench and the fleeting shadow of a great body in the entrance of their shelter. He shot his rifle, and the beast retreated to the forest. The following day, after long hours at the streams checking their traps, the two hunters returned to camp and found their lean-to destroyed once more. The same large footprints trailed away from the camp toward a brook where they appeared as plain as if in snow. Bowman had to admit that, whatever the creature it was, it had indeed escaped on two legs. Now they hardly slept that night, for the sounds of twigs snapping in the gloom alerted the men to the animal's presence. As their fire blazed, the trappers sensed it waiting and heard its woeful cry echoing through the woods. Bowman and his friend decided the next morning that this would be their last in the creepy vale. Together, they gathered the empty traps from the stream, dividing the thick pine thickets, plagued by a sense of being followed. Yet sun shone brightly in the clearing as they packed their bags, and the fears of the previous night began to seem silly. Bowman volunteered to retrieve the last 3 traps from a nearby river, which ended up taking a few hours. He returned to a scene of horror. The still warm body of his friend was leaning against a tree with 4 awful fang marks piercing his broken neck. Telltale footprints surrounded the unfortunate victim. The beast had not devoured the flesh, but merely romped and gabbled around it in an uncouth, ferocious glee. The hunter had become the hunted. Neither Bowman nor Roosevelt ever identified the culprits as a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot, but its bipedal stance, hideous smell, and prolonged screaming in the northern wood dovetails with descriptions of indigenous stories. Those Sasquatches aren't bloodthirsty murderers in the legends. Likewise, Bowman's identity is a mystery. He may have been Carl L. Bowman, who, according to the Montana Historical Society, was born in Germany in 1831, moved west in the 1860s, and died March 20th, 1909, near Melrose, Montana. Beyond that brief clue in the Montana Historical Society journal, Bowman remains as enigmatic as the tale he shared with Theodore Roosevelt. But that tale has indeed been shared, and I've gone out to the deserts of Arizona, Moab, Nevada, etc., and found numerous petroglyphs, and so haven't many others, of massive beasts carved in stone. Now, if someone is living in a place where the only writing implements or recording devices they have are rock and stone, it has to be something very impressive for them to actually take the time out of their day hunting, gathering, fending off other tribes, etc., to actually make a record of things like this. And it's been done throughout our entire history, whether you're aware or not. So take this for what it's worth. This guy isn't a conspiracy theorist from YouTube. He used to be the President of the United States. So there's that. Now, just some food for thought. This picture I'm showing right now is what started the Bigfoot craze. Let me explain something to you. The picture you're looking at, or the actual Gimlin recording, the Bigfoot shown has been proven to not be a person in a suit, and the Bigfoot shown also has breasts. Technology and fugazi work they couldn't do back in the day when this video was taken. So bear that in mind before everybody laughs and snickers. And here's a little bit more food for thought. Just like with unidentified flying objects and otherworldly beings that the government, the military, everyone is denied for time immemorial, suddenly in the last 10 years, the Pentagon, the White House, the military, the Navy, the Air Force have all come forward saying, yes, we videotaped them, we don't know what they are, they're not of this world, etc. Everything they tell us is not accurate. We live in a world with people that were here, their families were here before we were, they're wealthy, and the way to keep people under control is to control information. Keep an open mind and understand there's a lot more out there than we even know. And if you've never made it out to the woods, the mountains, the deserts, etc., and you just base everything off television, internet, and Google answers, chances are you could be wrong. And before I wrap this up, here's some of the astrophotography I took while I was at Devil's Tower. At any rate, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment below. I will try to return the favor. I am out.